I want to talk to you today about the miracles of Christ, and more specifically, who he chose to heal. The Bible tells us a few stories. We assume there's many more, but who did he choose to heal? Now, there are a few of the upper class he healed: nobleman's son, Jairus' daughter, perhaps turning the water into wine at the wedding. But Christ seemed to specialize in people like the man at the Pool of Bethesda, many others who were at the edges of society, the marginalized, the cast out, those who were dependent upon others even for their very existence. Does Christ have the same capacity, willingness to heal the man with lung cancer who smoked all his life? Is he eligible? The person with a heart attack because of a poor lifestyle, is she eligible? Are we more willing to forgive the victim of an accident than the drunk driver who caused it? Or the genetic defect than the acquired habit? Who does Christ choose to heal? And we often, as back in those days, we go to the question of causation. Why did this happen? Who caused it? Somebody did something wrong. They're the ones to blame. Does it make any difference who caused it? A generous donor has commissioned the Adventist artist Nathan Green to paint the 12 miracles of Christ. And he's in the process. The first 4 are completed and hung. I would encourage you to go see them. They're between the Hinshaw Towers, the old hospital, heading down the grand hallway into the new hospital, hang 4 of those paintings. And over the next couple years, the rest of 8 of them will be put up. The first one you'll see is Jairus' daughter. Nathan Green went to the Middle East, spent a month there looking at the different sites where these miracles occurred so he could more accurately portray what was happening. You see Jesus in the room, the mother and father standing beside, Peter, James, and John with them, wondering. As Jesus took Jairus' daughter's hand, we don't know what she died of, probably pneumonia or maybe measles encephalitis, we don't know. And you can see the pink fronting up her arm, yet get to reach her face, white in death. The next one is a blind man, blind from birth, probably congenital cataracts. And of course, the Pharisees tried to nail Jesus on that one. Who sinned? This guy or his parents? And Jesus ducked the issue. So I can have a blessing. He can be blessed today. And the woman with the discharge. You wonder how many people knew about it. Some did. Probably had uterine fibroids, been bleeding for 12 years. Touched the hem of Christ's garment to be healed. And finally, the paralytic. He had some friends, led him through the roof to be healed. As Jesus portrayed it, it would appear to be a case of severe cerebral palsy, probably caused by a difficult delivery, apoxia at birth, that caused his deformities. So Jesus seemed to specialize in the marginalized. He sought out those who had no other choices. One of our graduates from here a few years ago, Dr. Amy Apigian, is just publishing a book entitled The Biology of Trauma. Amy's had quite some experience in her life. Adopted a difficult child, cared for a lot of patients, a lot of lived experiences that have taught her a lot of lessons. And so she's become an expert on the biology of trauma. What happens when you have bad experiences? What does that do to you? And frankly, what does that do to your children and to their children? Because, see, we understand now that the concept of epigenetics, epi-on genetics, is that there are little switches that turn certain genes on and off that are influenced by our behaviors. When the Bible talks about under the 3rd and 4th generation, this is probably what it's talking about. those characteristics transmitted through generations. We have the term today, ACE, adverse childhood experiences. What a child goes through early in life, even in utero, can influence their behavior, even things like heart disease and cancer, and the next generation as well. Another Amy, Dr. Amy Young, on our faculty now for some years, is director of RICA, Resiliency Institute for Childhood Adversity. She has a job, I even hate to think about the term, forensic pediatrics. It's distasteful even to think about. She deals with child abuse all day long, every day. Children that have been terribly abused by their parents, by their in-laws, by others. It takes a special knack, a special skill, a special passion to do that. But Amy says the most painful part of that is to see a child that I've rescued from abuse. I've got a good home, foster parents that cared for her, made it on into school even, doing okay. Only to see their children come in now being abused under the third and fourth generation. So if we're searching out the marginalized today, where would we find them? And who are they? I'd like to suggest that today many of the visible difficulties, diseases, disabilities are probably already taken care of. People have had surgery, they've had various things happen. But many of the most difficult things are the subtle ones, the invisible ones, the internal ones, the things that we struggle with that others may not see. So let me talk about a few of those. Let me start with behavioral disorders. Autism spectrum. We now realize that's pretty common among us. ADD, attention deficit disorder. ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. How many people struggle with those that we don't see and yet they get pushed out because of the way they behave, their activities? Every Thursday morning, I have the privilege of still seeing patients here in our Center for Health Promotion. And I sit beside Dr. Alan Darnell in our little doctor's cubicle and have a chance to talk occasionally. He cares for the students here at Loma Linda. And he talks to me about some of the students he sees. Brilliant students that have trouble focusing, have trouble keeping their mind on what they're focused on. Fail their grades because they can't stay focused. A disability that very few of us see and yet can have such an impact on life. We talk about another one. Obesity shaming. We now have a code for obesity. It's considered a disease. 30% of Americans are obese, 30% or more above ideal weight. Another 30% or 20% above ideal weight, or what we call overweight. There are many different causes for obesity. It's hard to explain, hard to understand, hard to treat. We have newer drugs now, the Wegovys and the Ozempic of the world, but still a difficult situation to treat. How do we deal with it? When you see somebody in Stater Brothers that's way overweight, what goes through your mind? You condemn them? Come on, just don't eat so much. I was covering our weight management clinic a few years ago and going through a variety of patients. And a woman came in and says, doing very well. She started off around 300 pounds. She'd lost about 50 pounds, as I recall, was on a roll, doing good progress. We developed a bit of a relationship. I was encouraging her, blessing her, outlining plans for the next month. And then she turned to me and said, Dr. Hart, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to drop out of the program. She saw the surprised look on my face. She'd been doing so well. said, no, I can't do it anymore. And went on to tell me the story, how the night before she had been downtown San Bernardino, Central City Mall, shopping. As she walked out across her parking lot to her car, her arms were full of packages, gotten dark. And she walked out across the parking lot. Here came a great big old burly man walking right up towards her. Says, the one thought that went through my mind is, I'm glad I'm fat. He won't want me. And then went on to relate how indeed she'd been sexually abused as a child by her father. Her whole way of dealing with her sexuality centered around her obesity. Obesity shaming. Gender dysphoria. That's a tough one for us. For us, the conservative church, more common term we use, LGBTQI, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, often now Q and I, queer and intersex, people that are not sure, either in their mind or in their body, which gender they are. How do we deal with that? Kirby Oberg, one of our scientists, has shown that in fact, clear back in utero, genetic hormonal changes probably set people on a path towards some of these things. I had a friend back in academy. We got our pilot's license together when we were first eligible at age 16. Both went on, got married, had kids, had families, stayed in intermittent contact only. Then about 10 or 15 years ago, I got a call. Dick, I need to come down and talk to you. Sure. So I made an arrangement to meet him. I remember we sat in a car, parking lot here in Loma Linda. My wife and I, talking with him. As he poured out his soul, how even as a little child, he wanted to play with dolls and not with trucks. He wanted to dress like a girl. He said, Dick, I stuffed it for all these years. I got married, I had a family. It's just like it's going to blow up inside of me. I have no choice. It's just taking over me. I have to be who I am. It was raining. It was like God was crying tears as this man struggled with his future, what to do. And I can tell you our response at that time was not one of condemnation or criticism. But we said, let us put our arms around you and love him or her in the fight you're facing, the battle you're struggling with. Homelessness. What do you do with that? I come to work each morning, I come down through Mentone, and one of the stoplights is right where a group of homeless often gather. I like to look over and wonder, what is their background? It's very difficult to get a homeless person to look you in the eye. They've been beaten down so much. Probably not unlike the lepers in the Bible. Somebody going through life, pleasant family, children, and a spot shows up on their body, little white spot, doesn't go away, gets bigger. They finally go to the priest and said, sorry, it's leprosy, you're out. Cast out. Can't be with your family, can't live in the village, get thrown out. Many different causes of homelessness. It's not just losing a job. There's many different things that go on. But the question is, how should we relate to that? Addictions. My goodness. We got a lot of them today. We used to talk about drugs and alcohol, but now there's many more. Gambling, pornography, sexual addiction. Many of us have compulsive behaviors that get a dopamine rush from following out our addictions. How do we deal with that? How would Christ relate to that? Poverty. Y'all are looking pretty good. But there's a lot of people that aren't here because of poverty. A few years ago, I was visiting with Marge Jeton. She was about 105 years of age at that time. You're living here in Loma Linda. She said, Dr. Hart, the only good thing about getting this old is you have no peer pressure. But young people have a lot of peer pressure. You go to our academies, you go to our schools, the haves and the have-nots. Tough life for many of them. A few years ago, I was coming back off Pisgah Peak early one Sabbath morning, my usual hike, and happened to bump into about halfway down an old friend from grade school days. Hadn't seen her in years. She was visiting friends in the area and happened to go out hiking that morning. So we stood and exchanged stories from the old days. Talked about what a wonderful childhood it was, lived in a little community, went to a little 2-room church school with 25 students in 8 grades. All the fun we had in the winter on our skis and sleds and the summer and all the things that we did. Glorious childhood. And I looked over at her and saw her eyes down. I said, Dick, it wasn't that way for us. We were dirt poor. We didn't get to have a sled or a bicycle. We were on the edge. Those were painful days, a painful chapter in my story. Poverty. And finally, culture and race. If I suggest perhaps the bane of this society today, why do we have so much difficulty accepting each other? Why can we not recognize that I have an accent to you? That your food is different than mine? That your background, your skin color may be different? But we are all God's children. I wrote this week in my President's News Note about my own background. A group of us are flying to Nova Scotia next week to gather at a place where my great-great-grandfather jumped ship as a British sailor, changed his name to Hart, became an illegal alien, and joined this country. Do I have the right to be here? Should I be going home? Where is home? And who owns this country anyway? I desperately wish we could come to the point where we have a comfort level with each other, regardless of background, regardless of skin color, regardless of language, regardless of cultural traits, that we see each other as a child of God. As a university, one of the things that I struggle with is how do I now help the next generation of health professionals learn these lessons? How do I move head knowledge to heart knowledge? How do I create a setting where they start understanding the deeper issues of relationships, of life? We have a number of programs here. I'm sure many of you participate in them. SIMS, Students for International Mission Service. Over 1,000 people from this campus participate every year, going somewhere outside the country. They think they're going out to cure the world. I know I'm creating a teachable moment, a chance for them to step into somebody else's culture, somebody else's shoes, to confront human need, to understand that there's a different perspective on life than what I bring to it. We have a program called CAPS, Community Academic Partners in Service, that takes our students 3 miles north of here to East San Bernardino, where there's a whole different world. We have a music program for the children. We encourage the students to go to a child's home. It's not until you enter somebody's home, until you understand their jokes, that you start getting some sense of another culture. How do we create that? My personal belief is it's important that we encourage each student to confront human need, to stare it in the face, to have to ask themselves the question, why not me? Who is my brother? Am I just another beggar looking for food? Those are the challenges that we face. And how do we go about confronting them in the world in which we live? Unfortunately, most of the people I've talked about are not here this morning. They're not comfortable in church. They've long ago learned where it's safe and have drawn their own lines. How do we break that? How do we move beyond a judgmental perspective? As health professionals, how do we move beyond a diagnosis and treat to an understanding and acceptance? That's tough. It's very tough. It's tough to learn it. It's tough to maintain it. I want to share a final story with you. This one occurred in a small town. Family, 3 children, a boy and 2 girls growing up. The youngest girl, as she grew older, turned out to be one of those beautiful young women that turns eyes as she walks by. I have 3 daughters. Nothing that makes a father proud than to have a good-looking daughter. There's nothing that scares a father more than having a good-looking daughter. And as she grew, the family recognized, the village recognized this beautiful young lady. And then the unthinkable thing happened. The mother heard it first down at the market. The father heard it as he came back in from the shop. Their daughter, their beautiful young daughter, had been caught in prostitution, caught in adultery. What do you do when that happens? It was a quiet night at home that night. Everybody ate in silence. What was there to say? Mom and Dad were awake all night long wondering what had happened. How had they gone wrong? What to do now? They kick her out? They pull her in? What do you do? Life finally moved on. Next morning they talked a little bit, uncomfortable. Gradually over the next few days, life kind of went back to normal. And then it happened again and again. And their daughter, their beautiful young daughter, came to be known as the village prostitute. She'd long ago given up on church. No point in going there anymore. They had already rejected her. Not many friends in town. What do you do as a village prostitute? She begged forgiveness. She determined to make her life new again. They finally agreed the best thing was to move to a neighboring village where she had some relatives and try to start her life again. She packed a few belongings, headed down the road. Found a job, determined to straighten her life out. Then some visitors from the previous town came, saw her. Old temptations returned, and she slipped back into a life of prostitution. Then one day she heard that a visiting preacher was coming to town. She'd given up in church a long time ago, so she didn't really go to hear his preaching. She was just curious who this character was. So went down to the edge of the crowd and listened a bit. And it was there that Mary first met Jesus. And you know the story. The accusers were there. They blamed Jesus, said, does Jesus know who this is? And he bent over and started writing in the sand. The Bible tells us that later on, Jesus cast 7 demons out of Mary. So whatever was going on was still going on. And finally, we found Mary back in Bethany, her hometown. Not invited to Simon's party that he threw for Jesus. Bible scholars suggest that Simon was probably her uncle and probably the one who led her into adultery in the first place. So he certainly would not want her at the party. She snuck in the back door and anointed his feet with perfume. Then we next find Mary at the foot of the cross. The disciples had escaped, feared for life. Mary ministered to Jesus. And then finally Sunday morning, the first one to the tomb, found the stone rolled back, turned to the gardener and says, Sir, where have they taken him? I want to anoint his body. And Jesus looked down at her and says, Mary. And she recognized his voice. If you think of that setting, here was Mary, the village prostitute, the demon-possessed woman, the frequent sinner, chosen by Christ to be the first to announce to the world the most wonderful news of all mankind, that he is risen. That's the kind of Christ I serve. That's the kind of Christ that says, I love each of you, be my child.